The label was off by 2 millimeters. That is not a thing most people would see. A machine prints those labels and a machine applies them, and a machine does not have a bad night. It does not get called away, it does not put a label on crooked because it is holding a box lid down with one elbow. When the tape gun does it, the barcode sits square inside the printed frame. Every time, 40,000 times a day. This one sat low and to the left 2 millimeters. Enough that when I ran the scanner over it, the reader chirped twice instead of once. It was 11:40 at night on my first shift at Distribution Center 6, Fort Calder, North Carolina, and I was wearing a contractor badge that said Cross E. Inventory. Temporary. The building smelled like damp cardboard and rust preventative and the ozone off the forklift chargers. Somewhere down in the far bays a radio was playing country low enough that you only caught the drum. I was supposed to be counting. I set the scanner down on the pallet rail. I put my thumb against the corner of the label and I lifted slow, the way you lift a scab you already know is going to bleed. It came up clean, no tearing, no adhesive ghost, no paper fiber left behind. Someone had peeled this label off, opened this carton, and put the same label back on by hand. Underneath the cardboard was scored, one clean slit along the tape seam, resealed with a strip of clear packing tape that did not match the factory tape. The factory tape had a printed watermark, this did not. I stood there for a while with my hand flat on the box. The carton was supposed to contain 12 tactical GPS receivers. Serialized, controlled. The kind of item that has its own paperwork trail and its own line in the property book and its own set of rules about who is allowed to breathe on it. The kind of item that, on the other side of an ocean, is worth more than the truck it rides in. I took out my phone, which is not a thing a temporary inventory clerk is supposed to have on the floor, and I photographed the label, the seam, the tape, and the cage number stenciled on the upright behind it. Cage 6 down the aisle, a forklift beeped in reverse. I put the phone away and picked the scanner back up, and I counted the rest of the row like a person who counts for a living. 12 receivers. I logged 12. There were 11 in that box, and the man who took the 12th had a key to a cage I was not cleared to open, and by the end of the month he would try to put it in the hand of a 20-year-old. 9 days earlier I had let my sister get me the job. The Doyles do Sunday dinner. They have done it for 11 years, since Bethany married Mark, and the rule is that nobody talks about work and everybody talks about work. My mother was there. My mother is a small woman who solves feelings by putting a dish in front of them. She had made the green beans with the bacon, and she kept moving them toward me, like the beans were an argument she was winning. So it's set, Bethany said. She starts a week from Monday. Temp contract through the holidays. It's set, Mark said. Mark Doyle is a colonel. He commands the Fort 1st Sustainment Brigade, which means that on any given day about 1,100 people move things because he told them to. He is a big man who has stayed in shape out of spite, and he has a way of being generous that leaves a mark. He is not a shouter. Shouters are easy. Now look, he said, it's counting. I want to be straight with you, Elena, because I don't think anybody's been straight with you in a while. It's counting boxes. It's not a career, but it's a badge and it's a paycheck and it's indoors. That's good, I said. You don't need a degree for it. He was cutting his bread with a fish knife, because they were out of the other kind, and it was making a sound like sanding. That's the beauty of it. Some people, you put them in a room with a checklist and they thrive. There's no shame in that. No shame in it, my mother agreed and moved the beans. When the check came, Mark took it, and he made a point of turning it toward himself so the table could see him doing it, and he said, I've got hers, and my nephew laughed because he was 9, and something about the way the adults got quiet had been funny to him. Under the table, Bethany found my hand and squeezed it once, hard. I'm sorry, she said very low. I did not ask what for. That was the mistake, though at the time it felt like discipline. I had been trained for 11 years not to ask questions I did not need the answer to. Later, in the parking lot, my mother hugged me and said, It's steady work. And then she said, Don't mention the warehouse thing around Mark. All right, he's got a lot on him. What warehouse thing? Nothing, my mother said. Your father? Nothing. They unprocessed me at 07 the next Monday in a conference room with a coffee stain shaped like Ohio on the table. Colonel Doyle came through at the end of the safety brief, the way commanders do, to be seen. He shook 4 hands. He got to me last. This is Elena, he said to the room. She's my sister-in-law, be nice to her. 40 people looked at the floor at the same time. Then he was gone, and a chief warrant officer with a gray mustache and a chain of keys on his belt, heavy enough to change how he walked, came over and stuck his hand out. Dale Renner, he said, property book, what's your name? Elena Cross, Elena, he nodded like he was filing it. Cross, okay. 40 minutes later, he passed me in the hallway and said, Elena, without breaking stride, and that was the first thing about Fort Calder that I actually liked. The other thing I noticed that morning was a specialist named Booth. 20 years old, maybe, she held her clipboard against her chest like a shield. When Doyle said, during the brief, that the discrepancies on the sensitive item counts were a night shift discipline problem, and we are going to fix it, Booth looked at a spot on the wall about 2 feet above his head and did not move at all. You learn to read that. That is not the face of somebody who did it. That is the face of somebody who has been told she did it. And by the end of the day I had the shape of the building, which is the only thing I actually needed. Colonel Doyle signed, Chief Renner ran it. Everybody in that warehouse, if you ask them who to go to when something was broken, would have said the same name, and it would not have been the Colonel's. My apartment was a furnished one-bedroom off Bragg Boulevard with a lease in a name that was not exactly mine. That night I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and wrote the first report. I am a major in the United States Army. I have 16 years in. For the last 4 of them I have been detailed to the Department of Defense Inspector General, Forensic Logistics, which is the polite way of saying that when equipment leaves the inventory and does not leave through a door anyone can name, they send me. The receivers had been going out of Fort Calder for 14 months. 61 of them. They had surfaced twice on foreign resale markets. Once in a photograph a customs officer in a country I am not going to name took of a table at an open-air electronics market. That photograph was the reason I was in a warehouse with a scanner. I wrote it up. I attached the photographs of the seam and the label. I sent it encrypted to Kendra Vance, who runs the team, and who has never in 4 years said a single warm word to me and has also never once failed to back me. Then I took the padlock out of my bag and set it on the carpet in front of me. It is an old brass sergeant and green leaf, scratched to hell, with a service number scratched into the shackle by hand with something sharp. My father put that number there. Chief Warrant Officer Ray Cross. Property Book Officer. 22 years. And at the end of it a shortage he did not create and a retirement he did not choose. And 6 years ago a heart attack in a parking lot in Lawton, Oklahoma, at the age of 63. That lock is the only object from 22 years of service that the Army did not take back because nobody ever put it on a hand receipt. I did not hang it anywhere, I put it back in the bag. Vance wrote back at 11:50, if somebody is moving this volume, somebody is signing for it. I want the signature. The next day I found out that the system does not like a clerk who asks questions. You cannot pull transaction history from a floor terminal on an inventory badge. What you can pull is the last shipment record for a container you have physically scanned, because the system assumes you are standing in front of it and confused. That is a small door, I went through it 6 times. 6 shipments, 14 months. Every one of them had moved under a transportation control number that had already been used. That is not sloppiness. A duplicated control number is a shipment wearing another shipment's clothes. The paperwork says a thing already left, so when the thing leaves, the system nods. I sat in a plastic chair in the data room with my hands flat on my knees for about a minute. Then I pulled the approval line on all 6. Every one of them was released under the same signature block. Doyle, Mark A. Colonel, I gave it 3 days before I asked because you do not ask a question you cannot afford the answer to on a Tuesday. Thursday morning stand-up, 40 people, coffee. The delivery metrics board on the wall by the door with the 41st in green across every column. Best in the region, and Doyle standing under it the way a man stands under a photograph of himself. Sir, I said, the Lot 6 release from March. It's showing a control number that's already closed out. Do you want me to flag that to transportation, or does it get fixed at your level? I want to be honest about something. I asked it in front of 40 people on purpose. I told myself it was because I wanted to see the room react. It was not only that. Mark did not turn red. He got very calm and very pleasant, and he set his cup down. Elena, he said, let me help you out. Do you know what a control number is? It's a shipment identifier, sir. It's an identifier. Right, and do you know how many of those move through this brigade in a week? He waited. He was smiling. It's a lot. So what happens is, the people whose job it is to look at those, and the people whose job it is to count boxes. That's how a brigade works. It's not an insult, it's a design. Somebody laughed, not meanly, just because the room needed to. Yes, sir. Now, he picked the cup back up. Sergeant Ellis, move Cross down to the retrograde yard for the rest of the month. Outdoor work, fresh air. He looked at me over the rim. It suits somebody who likes counting. The retrograde yard is where broken and returned equipment goes to be sorted in the weather. From the retrograde yard you cannot see cage 6, you cannot see anything. That is the part I need you to hold on to, because I did not hold on to it at the time. A guilty man protects the evidence. Mark moved me away from the question. He never once went near the cage. Afterward, in the hallway, Chief Renner fell into step beside me. That was rough, he said. It's fine. It's not fine, it's rough. He's tight right now. He's got the award package in, and he's got a board coming. Let me talk to him. He patted the door frame twice as he went through it. I'll get you back inside, Elena. Give me a week. He was so willing. I remember thinking that is a good man, and going out to the yard in the rain. It rained for 2 days. On the second afternoon I found Specialist Booth behind the Connex, sitting on an overturned crate with her sleeves pulled down over her hands, crying in the completely silent way that people cry when they have gotten good at it. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm on break. I swear I'm on break. I'm a contractor, Booth. I can't do anything to you. She wiped her face with her wrist and laughed, one wet syllable. Everybody can do something to me right now. I sat down on the pallet across from her. I did not say anything. That is a technique, and it is also just what you do. After a while she said, they think it's me, the sensitive item numbers. It's night shift, and night shift is me and Delgado's got 11 years, so. Do you get told to recount all the time, same pallet? She looked up. Yeah, she said slowly, sometimes the same one 3 times in a night. They say my counts don't reconcile, and then I recount and it's fine, and then in the morning it's wrong again. Her jaw went hard. I started writing down the times. What times? When I get told to go recount. Which pallet? What time? Who told me? She pulled a little green memorandum book out of her cargo pocket, the kind they hand out by the box, and held it against her chest without opening it. In case, I don't know, in case. That was smart. It's not smart, it's scared. She put it back in her pocket. Please don't tell Chief. He's the only one who sticks up for me. 2 days later, Renner got me back inside, exactly like he said he would, and then he invited me into the property book office and poured me a cup of coffee out of a machine he had bought himself. His office had a corkboard with his daughter's swim meet schedule on it, and a filing cabinet, and a key cabinet with a glass front. You want to understand this place, he said, you have to understand allowable loss. And then he explained it to me, and he explained it perfectly. Better than most warrant officers could. The shrink, the damage, the reconciliation windows, the way a big enough system has to have a little slack in it or it seizes. He was a good teacher. He talked with his hands. So a certain amount just evaporates, I said. A certain amount evaporates, he agreed. And the trick of this job is knowing what's evaporation and what's a leak. He slid a paper across the desk. Here, adjustment voucher, it's 3 floor jacks. Sign as the counting party so I can close it. I signed it. I want to be clear about what happened there, because it took me 11 more days to see it. He did not need my signature. He wanted my name in the system. One time, in his handwriting's neighborhood, so that if anything ever came apart, there would be a temporary contractor's name in the file. I was looking at the key cabinet while I signed. There were 4 spare key sets hanging on brass hooks. 3 of them had blanks worn dull gray, the 4th blank was bright. You remind me of a chief I knew, Renner said, taking the voucher back. Long time ago, same way of looking at a room, I did not ask him for the name. That Saturday was my nephew's birthday, and there were maybe 20 people in the Doyle's backyard, and Mark cooked. I got there at 2, by 2:15 he had me carrying the ice. He did it beautifully, he did not order me, he came out on the deck with the cooler and said, Elena, you mind? You're the only one here I don't have to be polite to. And everybody laughed, including me, and I carried the ice. At the grill he told a neighbor I was doing inventory out at the center, and that every family has got one who needs a hand up, and that his wife has a big heart. Bethany was standing 4 feet away holding a stack of paper plates. Mark, she said. He did not raise his voice. He did not even look over. He said, Beth, I'm feeding your sister, and turned the chicken. I watched my sister's face do a thing I had never seen it do before, which was nothing. Absolutely nothing. 11 years of practice at nothing. Later, my mother stood next to me by the drinks table and said, out of nowhere, your father worked a warehouse too. You know. At the end there, I know, he was good at it. She picked up a napkin and put it back down. Have some of the potato salad, the good ones on the left. And she walked away. And that was the entire conversation my family had about my father in the 30 years since he retired and the 6 since he died. I stood there with a cup of sweet tea in my hand, and I understood something about myself that I did not enjoy. I wanted it to be Mark, not suspected, wanted. I had 6 shipments under his signature and a man who talked to me like I was furniture, and somewhere under my sternum a thing had lit up and said good. An investigator who wants a particular answer is not an investigator. She is a person with a badge and a grudge, and I have watched that kind of person end a career that did not deserve to end. I watched it happen to my father from the back seat of a car in a parking lot in Oklahoma when I was 16. I put the tea down. I did not touch it again. Monday I called Vance from my car in the lot of a grocery store with the engine off. 6 shipments, she said, duplicated control numbers. Approval line, the brigade commander, yes. Cross, that chain requires property book access. Not command access, property book, which means your suspect pool is the commander, the property book officer, and whoever they've delegated to. A pause. Is there anything you need to tell me? I looked at a woman loading a case of water into a minivan. Colonel Doyle is my brother-in-law. The silence went on for 4 seconds. I counted them. Then you file the conflict declaration today, Vance said, or you're off the site tonight. I need 72 hours. For what? To get one more thing, I said, so it doesn't look like I built a case against family. That was a lie. And it was not even a good one. And Vance let me have it anyway, which is a thing I will owe her for the rest of my career. Because what I actually did with those 72 hours was hold onto a data point that pointed away from Mark. The loss adjustments I had noticed by then were not entered under a command signature at all. They were entered under a property book pin. I had that on the Monday. I sat on it until Thursday, 72 hours, remember that number. Wednesday night I went out to cage 6 at 1 in the morning with a flashlight and no authority whatsoever. The camera in that aisle sweeps. At the end of its arc there is a 9-second blind period. That is not a security failure, that is just geometry. And everybody who works a night shift in that building knows about it the way you know where the floor creaks in your own house. I was not there for the camera, I was there because of a rule. My father had a rule about locks. He said it to me maybe 30 times in a garage over a coffee can full of hardware. A lock doesn't tell you who came in. A lock only tells you who was supposed to be able to. Meaning, do not look at the lock. Look at whether it is the same lock. I knelt down with the flashlight in my teeth and I looked at the padlock on cage 6. The body was scratched to hell, sun-faded, 15 years old if it was a day. The core was bright. Somebody had rekeyed that lock. Legitimately on paper with a work order. You can do that, it is maintenance, nobody blinks. And the second that happens there is a new key blank, and a new key blank means a new set of keys. And one of them goes in the cabinet and one of them goes wherever the person who ordered the rekey wants it to go. I sat back on my heels in the dark, and then I did something stupid and sentimental, which is not a thing I do. I took my father's brass padlock out of my bag, and I hung it on the outer gate of cage 6 alongside the government one, and I clicked it shut. Temporary, I told myself, just so I know if anyone comes through here. I was not thinking about who might see it and want it gone. Thursday morning I filed the conflict of interest declaration. I typed it in a borrowed office with the blinds shut. 2 paragraphs. The first one said that the commander of the unit under investigation was married to my sister. The second one said that for 72 hours I had withheld an exculpatory data point from my team lead because it weakened a hypothesis I preferred. The second paragraph was not required, I put it in anyway. Vance read it in front of me on her tablet and did not change expression once. You know what this does, she said. It puts a defense attorney's name on me. It puts a defense attorney's name on everything you touch. She set the tablet down. You stay. You're the only one inside, and I'm not burning 14 months to make myself feel tidy. But understand this, Major, from today you don't decide anything. You don't decide the timeline, you don't decide the venue, and you absolutely do not decide the day this becomes public. Understood, you gave that up when you wrote paragraph 2, she almost softened. Which was the right call, which I am telling you exactly one time. I had spent 11 days as a person nobody could see. I had just signed away the ability to choose when that ended. By Friday my badge did not open the sensitive item corridor. It was not personal, according to the memorandum. The brigade was tightening access ahead of the supply excellence evaluation. Temporary contract personnel would be limited to general storage. Also, my contract was flagged for early termination review, effective in 14 days. 48 hours before that access cut took effect, I got the only thing that mattered. Booth gave me her green notebook. She did not know what she was giving me. She thought she was covering herself. 22 dates. Times to the minute, told to recount cage 6 aisle 0212. Told to recount, same pallet, 0240. I laid it against the gate logs from the truck court, which any inventory clerk can pull because inventory clerks are the ones who have to know when the trucks came. 6 nights, all 6, night shift badges out of the sensitive corridor at a certain time, because they have been sent to recount something 2 aisles over. A contract truck clears the gate somewhere between 40 and 50 minutes later. And in between, in that window, every single time, in a window that never once ran longer than 47 minutes, a loss adjustment gets entered into the property book. Not under a command signature, under a property book pin. I sat in my car in the dark with the notebook on the steering wheel and the gate logs on my phone, and I felt the floor of the case move. Because here is what 47 minutes meant. The signature was Mark's. The hands were not. Somebody had built a machine where a colonel's name went on the front of every single transaction, and a colonel's name is what you find when you audit, and a colonel's name is what you charge. Who else holds a property book pin? I already knew. I had watched him teach me what allowable loss was with his hands in a room with his daughter's swim schedule on the wall. Sunday dinner, and Mark opened the bottle. It was a bourbon he had been keeping for the day his name came off a promotion list, and he opened it early because he had already decided the rest was a formality. 100%, he said, wall to wall, unannounced, every sensitive line item in the brigade. 100% accountability. That's wonderful, my mother said. That's 14 months of my life, he poured. Award package went forward Thursday. Legion of Merit and the brigade take supply excellence at the ceremony Friday. There's a 2-star coming down. There's a Defense Logistics Agency flag officer coming down, which is unheard of. Mark, Bethany said, sit down and eat, and the other thing, he pointed the bottle at me, friendly. There was some kind of audit poking around the last few weeks. Some Inspector General thing. Gone, closed out, found nothing, because there's nothing to find. He set the bottle down and looked at me with what I think he honestly believed was affection. So, when your contract wraps up, Elena, and it's going to wrap up. That's just how temp lines work. You come see me. I'll find you something real, something with benefits. Thank you, I said. Everyone at that table thought they were safe. Mark thought the audit had found nothing. Chief Renner, wherever he was, thought the same thing, because he was the one who had spent 3 weeks quietly making the wall-to-wall come out at 100%. And 110 miles of paperwork away, my team had a warrant application drafted and no way to execute it before Friday. That night, Renner sent the night shift schedule out. Booth had Sunday. Booth was signed as the receiving party on the last remaining pallet in cage 6. At 2:10 in the morning, I parked on the shoulder outside the perimeter fence with my headlights off. I had no badge, I had no authority to be inside that fence. I had a phone, a pair of binoculars from a sporting goods store, and a clear line to the truck court. Here is what I want you to understand about that hour. It was not about Mark. It had stopped being about Mark somewhere around 47 minutes. Amaya Booth, 20 years old, was in that building signing for a pallet. If that pallet walked, her name was the last name on it. She would not go to jail because a colonel got sloppy. She would go to jail because a chief warrant officer with 22 years and a mortgage had picked a night when the receiving signature would belong to a specialist who had already been documented in 6 separate counseling statements as having discrepancy problems. He had built her the same way he had built Mark, one of them to take the charge, one of them to take the blame. At 2:57, a white contract box truck cleared the north gate. 47 minutes. I called Vance at 3:04 and she picked up on the second ring like she had been sitting up. I've been running the wrong direction, I said. For how long? Since the first week. Okay, Vance said, and then no inflection at all, give me the right one. The reception was Thursday night at the officers' club, the night before the ceremony, and I went because leaving would have been louder than staying. I had 90 minutes to get through. I stood near a window with a glass of soda water, and I watched my brother-in-law be the best version of himself, which he genuinely was. He remembered spouses' names. He pulled a shy lieutenant into a conversation. He was good at this. Then somebody asked how the family was connected, and Bethany said I was her sister, and Mark saw an opening for a story. Now you have to understand the history here, he said, to my sister, to my mother, to a major from division and 2 of his own battalion commanders. Their dad was a property book officer, 20-some years. And at the end of it he loses, what was it, Beth? $100,000 of equipment? Just gone. Whole warehouse unaccounted for. They walked him out. Mark, Bethany said, no, but the punchline. He put his hand on my shoulder. He was laughing. He was not being cruel in his own mind. I am fully convinced of that. He was telling a story with a shape. The punchline is his daughter is out at my distribution center right now with a scanner, counting boxes. Same job, circle of life. Somebody made a sound that was almost a laugh. Oh, Mark said, and that reminds me, somebody's been hanging a personal padlock on cage 6. Some old brass thing, beat to hell, he shook his head, amused. You can't do that, unauthorized device on a controlled cage. I had the guys cut it off Tuesday and pitch it in the scrap bin. Whoever it was, they'll figure it out. I stood absolutely still. 4 feet to my left, a lieutenant commander in dress blues, the aide to the flag officer coming down from the Defense Logistics Agency in the morning, was holding a plate and looking at the floor with the particular fixed attention of somebody who has decided not to have heard something. And in a building 30 minutes north, a federal warrant with Chief Warrant Officer Dale Renner's name on it had been signed at 1700. I was the only person in that room who knew both of those things. I want to tell you that what changed in me was noble. It was not entirely. Up until that moment my plan had been to hand off my product, go home, and never explain myself to any of these people, to let the report speak and stay a stranger. That was pride wearing the costume of discipline. What changed was this. Mark had just taken a dead man's worst day and made it a punchline, and he had thrown away the only object my father ever owned that the army did not take back. And he had done both of those things while standing on the exact same floor he had never once bothered to read. I looked at him and I understood that if I said nothing, the report would destroy him, and it would be an accurate report, and it would be wrong. Bethany set her glass down on the window ledge, hard enough that the base cracked against the wood, and walked out of the room. She did not pick it up, she did not smooth it over. In 11 years I had never seen my sister leave a mess behind her. I left at 11 and I drove to the back of the distribution center and I climbed into the scrap bin. The lock was under about 2 feet of banding steel and broken pallet wood. They had cut the shackle, which was what I had hoped for, because a bolt cutter takes the shackle and leaves the body, and the body is where the core lives. I got it to the Defense Criminal Investigative Service office at 1 in the morning and put it on the table in front of an agent named Whitfield, who had been awake for 20 hours and looked at it like I had handed him a sandwich. This is a padlock. That's my father's, and it isn't evidence, and I want to be straight with you about that up front. I put my hand flat on the table. It's the reason I'm standing here at 1 in the morning instead of going home. Here's what is evidence. Pull the maintenance file on cage 6. The government core was replaced 11 months ago on a work order, and every rekey generates a blank series, and the blank series is stamped. He looked at me for a second, then he picked up the phone. By 4 in the morning we had it laid end to end, and it was one of those cases that goes from mud to glass all at once. The rekey work order for cage 6, submitted by, approved by, and receipted by Chief Warrant Officer Renner. The blank series on that work order matched the bright key in the glass front cabinet in his office. The property book pin entered in all 6 47-minute windows, his. Booth's notebook, 22 timestamps, the recount orders that cleared the corridor came from him. The contract carrier on all 6 gate logs, a company whose dispatcher had gone to high school with him in Ohio. And then at 4:40, Whitfield pulled a memorandum out of the file and set it in front of me without saying anything. It was 14 months old, subject, Delegation of Release Authority for Routine Sustainment Shipments. It streamlined the release process by consolidating approvals under a single command signature block, applied by batch. It had been drafted, staffed, and walked up to the commander's desk by Chief Warrant Officer Dale Renner. I sat there in a cold room at 4:40 in the morning and looked at the architecture of it. He had not just stolen 61 receivers. 14 months ago, before he took the first one, he had built the sentence that a colonel would eventually have to serve. He had put Mark Doyle's name on the front of every transaction, on purpose, in advance, so that when it came apart the auditors would find a signature and stop. Somebody had done that to my father. I have never known who, and I never will, and I have made a kind of peace with that. But somebody had, and here it was again, in a filing cabinet, in the same handwriting the Army uses everywhere. That memorandum was the only document in the entire file that proved Mark Doyle was negligent instead of complicit. I could have left it out, I want to be honest with you. It would not have been suppression, exactly, it was outside my assigned scope. It would have been an omission that a reasonable person could defend for years. I put it in the report. I put it in the executive summary, first page, second paragraph, where nobody could miss it. Vance called at 5:15. "You understand that they'll read your name tomorrow," she said. "Publicly, on the program, there's no version where you stay a contractor." "I understand. You'll never work undercover in this region again." "I know." "Okay then," Vance said, and hung up, which from her is practically a hug. The ceremony was at 0900 in the main hall of the distribution center, with the forklifts moved out and 300 chairs moved in. My mother and my sister sat in the second row. Mark sat on the stage in his blues with his hands on his knees. I stood at the back by the roll-up door with the other contract staff, in a polo shirt, which is exactly where I was supposed to be. Rear Admiral Diane Okafor came to the podium and did not pick up the award. She is a small woman with a very slow way of speaking, and she let the room get all the way quiet before she started. "Before we recognize this brigade," she said, "I'm going to close something out. Because it happened here, and I don't believe in doing this in a press release." I watched Mark's face. He still thought it was procedural. 14 months ago, the Department of Defense Inspector General opened Operation Clear Manifest. 61 controlled tactical GPS receivers left this installation across 6 shipments. They left under duplicated transportation control numbers, inside a 47-minute window on each occasion, and they were reported as allowable loss under a property book credential. A door opened in the side hallway. 2 agents walked Chief Warrant Officer Dale Renner out. No shouting, no handcuffs where the room could see them. He had his cover in his hand. He looked at the floor the whole way, and the thing I remember is that his keychain was gone off his belt, and his walk was wrong without the weight of it. Nobody gasped. That is not what happens. What happened was 300 people made a very small collective sound like a room exhaling, and then it was silent again. Admiral Okafor kept reading. The investigation found no evidence that the brigade commander participated in or profited from the diversion. It found that release authority for these shipments had been consolidated under his signature by a delegation memorandum drafted by the subject, and that the commander approved those releases without independent review on all 6 occasions. She turned a page. For the record, the field officer for this investigation filed a conflict of interest declaration on the 9th of last month, disclosing a family relationship to the commander, and disclosing her own investigative bias, and continued under supervision. That declaration is part of the file. Anybody who wants to litigate this later will find it there first. Then she looked up, out over 300 chairs, all the way to the back of the room. Field Officer, Operation Clear Manifest, Major Elena Cross, Department of Defense Inspector General. Nobody stood up in unison. Nobody shouted anything. An old sergeant, first class 2 rows in front of me, let his shoulders come down about an inch and said, "Huh," like a man setting down something heavy. Specialist Booth put both hands over her face and started crying, and she was not crying because she was moved. She was crying because 30 seconds earlier she had been a person with 6 counseling statements in her file about discrepancies. 2 warehouse chiefs near the front looked at each other and nodded slowly. because they had known for a year that something in that building was wrong and had not been able to say what. My mother stood up. My sister did not turn around to look at her husband. And Mark came off that stage and crossed the floor to the back of the room, past everybody, and stopped in front of me, and his voice was not angry. It was smaller than I had ever heard it. "Did you know?" he said. "The whole time sitting at my table, did you know?" There were about 9 things I had thought about saying over 11 days. "You signed it," I said. "You just never read it." They relieved him in the corridor. It took under 4 minutes. The 2-star did it himself quietly. By the water fountain, suspension of command pending a 15-6 investigation. Deputy commander assumes duties effective immediately. Award package withdrawn. Promotion file flagged. Mark handed over his phone. He said, "Yes, sir," 4 times. That was all. They recovered 38 of the 61. The government filed for restitution of $712,000, which it will not collect. The only line in that file I asked for myself was the one that took Specialist Amaya Booth's name out of it. I asked for it in advance, in writing, before I knew whether any of the rest of it would hold. I saw Renner once more in the parking lot being put into a car. He did not make a speech. They never do outside of movies. He said, "I only ever moved what was already getting written off." Then he said a number. It was not a large number, and it was not a good reason, and he said it the way you say a thing you have already said to yourself 1,000 times. And then as the agent put a hand on his head, he looked back at me and asked, "Does my daughter have to know about this? Is there a way she doesn't have to know?" I did not answer him. I stood in that parking lot and understood that somewhere in Oklahoma, 30 years ago, a man had probably said something very close to that about my father, and had probably meant it just as much. Mark was on the back porch when I got to Bethany's that afternoon. He had changed out of the blues into a t-shirt. He looked like a man who had been evicted from himself. "I want to say something," he said. "And I want to be straight, because you'll know if I'm not." He turned the beer bottle around in his hands. "I still don't think I did anything that 100 other colonels don't do every day. I signed a batch. Everybody signs the batch. That's the job now." "Okay, I know that's not what you want to hear." "It's what's true," I said. "That's better." He nodded at the yard for a long time. "A dog barked 2 houses down. I shouldn't have talked about your dad," he said. "Last night, that was no, I shouldn't have done that." That was all of it. That was the entire apology, and it took him 6 hours in the end of his career to produce it, and I have decided to believe that it was real, because it was the only sentence he said all day that did not have a defense built into it. Bethany came out with a cardboard box and set it on the step beside me. She did not sit. "I'm staying," she said. "I want you to hear that from me and not decide something about me because of it. I'm staying with him, Beth. But I'm not going to be quiet anymore." She said it to the yard, not to either of us. 11 years of standing there holding plates. I'm done doing that part. The box was our father's. His retirement certificate, a coffee can of hardware, a photograph of him at a warehouse door in Germany in 1987, with his arm around somebody whose name nobody now alive remembers. "I knew you weren't there for the counting job," Bethany said. "I didn't know what you were there for, but I knew that." I picked up the box. "I'm not coming to Sunday dinner," I said. "Not for a while, Elena. I'll come when somebody in this family can say Dad's name at that table without dropping their voice." My mother, standing just inside the screen door where she thought nobody could see her, said Ray. Just that, just his name at a normal volume in a kitchen. It was the first time I had heard it out loud in 6 years. 6 weeks later, I was back at Fort Calder for 2 days of closeout, and I went out to the retrograde yard at 6 in the morning because that is when Booth's shift ends. The application to the Army Board for Correction of Military Records went in on a Tuesday. It asks for a review of the 1996 shortage attributed to Chief Warrant Officer Ray Cross and the circumstances of his separation. It is 140 pages. It has the Renner Delegation Memorandum attached as a comparative exhibit, which my lawyer says is either brilliant or inadmissible. It has not been decided. Those take 2 years, sometimes 3, and most of them fail. I am telling you that because I do not want to hand you a version of this where I got everything. I did not get everything. I got 61 receivers accounted for, and a 20-year-old's file cleaned, and a colonel stopped before he signed something that would have ended worse, and I lost the ability to work quietly anywhere in this region for the rest of my career. And my father's record still says what it has said since before I was old enough to vote. Booth came out of the yard office pulling her cap off and stopped when she saw me. "Ma'am, cross is fine." "It really isn't though," she said, and almost smiled. I handed her the padlock. They had cut the shackle off it, so I had taken it to a locksmith in Fayetteville and had a new shackle fitted and the core rekeyed, and it is now a lock that has been rebuilt twice by 2 different people who were not the person who made it. The service number is still scratched into the brass by hand. "You can feel it with your thumb. That's a personal device," Booth said. "You can't put those on a cage, I know. Put it on your locker." I gave her the key. My father cut that number in with a nail. He had a rule about locks. He said a lock doesn't tell you who came in, it only tells you who was supposed to be able to. She turned it over. She was reading the number. "Which means what?" "Which means don't check whether it's locked," I said. "Check whether it's the same lock." She thought about that for a second, and then she nodded, once, the way people nod when they have decided to keep something. Then she walked back to cage 6 and pulled the gate shut, and threw the bolt and set the government padlock in the hasp and clicked it closed. And then she took hold of it and pulled on it hard, and then she did it again.